doing?
Good. How are you?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Sweet. Okay, so welcome everybody to Plane Talk Podcast. We're sitting down with airshow world champion Michael Goulian, and I just have a couple questions.
Sure.
Basically, I want to talk about your start and your dad and how he influenced you with flying.
So, as many people probably know, my family had a flying school just outside of Boston, Executive Flyers, and so my dad wanted me to earn a living and understand the value of a dollar. So when I was about 15 years old, instead of going to hockey camp that summer, I ended up going to Executive Flyers and washing planes and learned how to taxi them and work on them, change the oil and things like that. And I tell people that I didn't find aviation. Aviation found me. I had no preconceived notion of what airplanes were about. I was an athlete as a kid, but aviation is something that it's the sound, it's the feel, it's the smell that brings you to it.
Yeah.
And it's something that for me, I don't know what else I would ever want to do.
When did you start competing, and when did you start flying air shows? Were they different times?
So I'm kind of an old school guy in that regard, in that I flew my first air show in 1989. It was way too early.
Okay.
Right? I was like an intermediate guy, and not a very good one probably at that point. I was only like 3 years into Pitts ownership, and back in those days, you could get a surface level waiver, meaning no restrictions, right from the get-go, which is what I got. And I didn't know what I didn't know.
Yes.
Right? But I was lucky enough that I lived through that period. Today, it's very difficult to sort of, you start at 800 feet and you fly a ton of air shows, you fly to 500 feet, fly a ton of air shows, you go to 250 feet, fly a ton of air shows. And then, 4 or 5 years later, then you can get to the surface, and it's a process, which is way good because the safety record of air shows is much better than that. So
Absolutely.
I started competing when I was 17. I started flying air shows when I was 18, and like I said, now you need to be an advanced level pilot, in my estimation, to even begin to start the air show.
Excellent. There's Pablo.
Sorry, guys.
Hi, Pablo.
Don't mean to interrupt.
You did get mentioned in the last podcast, I want to say, about
really?
Very pilot being part of the team out of Abu Dhabi and part of the Red Bull team.
I'll have to listen to it.
PlaneTalkPodcast.com.
Are you having fun doing that?
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
You're on video.
Sorry. I didn't realize at all.
We didn't put the recording sign out. Okay, so then you started flying air shows, and then you were competing at really a national and a world level rather quickly there into the 90s.
Yeah, I had some really good advice. I had some very good mentors. Ian Groom was a guy that mentored me, and he gave me some great advice. And he said, don't move up until you win the nationals in advance. And then you'll go from the top of advanced to maybe not the top of unlimited, but somewhere in the top 5 or 6 or 7 guys in unlimited. And I did that. So I don't remember what year it was, probably 1989 maybe? 1990, I think. I probably flew in like 11 contests in that year.
Wow. And
won like 9 of them.
I've only done 4 in a year. So
yeah. So I flew everywhere, right? Started in Florida, went up to the Mid-Atlantic, up to New England, out to everywhere. Oklahoma, Texas, everything. Just flew and flew and flew and flew. So I flew advanced for I think 2 or 3 years. And I was lucky enough to win the nationals in advanced in 1990. And then that kind of springboarded me into unlimited, and I almost made the team, which was really difficult back then. My first time out, I was typical of everybody. I was like 4th in the guys until the unknown, and then I just didn't have any experience to do that.
Yep.
Which is a process that everybody goes through, right? And so for me, the competition it's still what I love to do more than anything else, and
that's where Red Bull really helps too, because you get to compete there.
You do, but competition aerobatic flying, I felt when I was at the top of my performance level in competition flying, I was so in tune with the plane, and you're trying to be so perfect, and you're being coached all the time. That was the highlight of my career, I think, from a flying standpoint in air shows. And there's some days in airshow flying that, hey, today was a good day, the positioning worked, all that was great, all the maneuvers were perfect, but you don't get the sort of satisfaction from it that you get on an amazing competition film.
Yes. Yeah, and it's fun to get tens. It's fun to have that critique. And at the end of the day, at the end of the banquet, to have your name called as the last guy in a category and be up there and shaking those hands. But you're absolutely right. You gave me some advice a couple years ago. Don't move up categories until they're chanting at you. Move up
Exactly.
at the banquets.
Exactly.
And so yeah, now I'm in intermediate. And, yeah, back right down at the bottom of the pile.
Yeah, it's hard, right?
So I just set little goals for myself to not to try and just fly clean.
Yeah.
I'm not out there to fly tens, but I'm not out there to get zeros.
Yeah, and I think so. If there's competition pilots that are watching this, the biggest mistake I see is people just go out and pound sequences. Right? I'm going to go practice. I'm just going to pound sequences, and it's one of those things that the group in my group, Kirby Chambliss, Matt Chapman, Phil Nikos, Clint McHenry, Patty Wagstaff, we never really did the full sequences. So we would do what we called slumps, single line unknown maneuvers, right? So we would go out and we would practice unknowns in 3-line sequences. Then we might put them together a couple days before the contest. But then in the known and the freestyle, I would only just work on combinations of figures and just try to be perfect. So I went out with a plan every single time. And the plan never had the sequence on there. It had pieces of that sequence. And I think that's a big thing, is to go out and try to learn 3 maneuvers well. Then go to the next 3. Try to do those really well. Try to do the next 3. And then put the first half together. That's great. Then put the second half together. That's great. Then put it all together.
Yeah. A lot of my practices, I would just do slow rolls. And then I would do a 45 up, half roll, wait, 45 down, half roll, and just do those pieces, those elements, and try to perfect them. But even that has a limitation. I can get comfortable with it. I can get what it should look like in the airplane, but it needs the eyes on the ground. You need good coaching. So what good coaches did you have?
So, there's a bunch of different people. So there's critiquers and there's coaches,
Okay.
right? There's, positive up, negative down, you torque the top, you did this, you pitched that. That's not a coach, right? A coach knows you, knows when you're tired, knows when you're having a good day. They know how to put the pressure on you when they need to make you better. They know when to pull off. They know your psyche, so they know when to be hard on you, when to be easy on you. And Sergei Boryak was the guy that I got along with the best.
Yeah.
And Sergei knew my flying better than I knew my flying. And he would push me. And that's the one thing, is you have to trust the person that you're with and go down that road, because there's a whole bunch of coaches now, and they all have a little bit different things. Nikolai is different than Patrick, who's different than Coco, who's different than Sergei. And you just have to pick a style that you like and then stick with that style. And then I never changed my flying depending upon where I would go. So the regional contests are judged differently than the nationals, which are judged differently than the world. So I would actually never, so for instance, a roll at the bottom into a half loop into something at the top, right? So the IAC, they do a combination. If you stop, they would want the loop to start immediately,
Yes.
right? No perceived movement after the roll is completed.
Right.
Well, in the World Championships, they don't like that. So let's just call it a simple 4-point roll. 1, 2, 3, 4, hesitation, go. So they like the rhythm of the roll to enter into the loop, and then the same thing at the top. So I would actually go to a regional contest thinking, well, I'm going to give that up, because really what I'm trying to do is win a world championship. So I wouldn't change my flying depending upon the judges.
Right.
I'd say, hey judges, this is what I'm going to do. You can give it a 7 if you want. You can give it a 9 if you want. I understand that it's not exactly like the rules, but I was trying to prepare myself, and I always slowly ramped up so that I was ready in September. So in June, I wouldn't fly quite as hard negative G-wise as I would in July, and then I wouldn't fly as hard in July as I would in August, and then in September I felt like Superman, and I could do anything, and then as soon as the Nationals ended, take that back off. And so we all talk about the wobblies. A lot of people in the world know about the wobblies, and that I think I've never really, knock on wood, had that.
Yeah.
And I think it's because I limited myself to 2 flights a day, and then I would just push very gently starting in the year. And I mean, I really wouldn't be flying full sequences, and really wasn't even ready to compete until like late May, early June.
Wow.
Yeah, I would take from March all the way till June to work up to that, so that my head stayed on straight, everything was square. And then again, I didn't want to have my best flying happen in June,
Right.
right? It's because you have to think of it like an athletic event, that you're getting better, and you're at your peak
Yeah.
when you want
That's when it matters.
it.
What do you do after a show to review and to kind of critique yourself to make sure that you put on the best show, or you can fix things for next time? But the lessons learned.
So, here we are at Sun and Fun, and we just flew a show which was the first show of the year. And for me to keep it interesting, I try to make it as much like a competition flight as I can, where I'm looking at all of the elements, all of the execution. Now, because it's an air show environment, 45s aren't 45s and things like that, but you're looking at the execution. Most importantly in the air show business is where the positioning is. So you're trying to present the picture right at show center, and slightly here and not too far extended either way. How well did we do that? And then the other piece, which is a big deal for us, is our music is very synced with what I'm doing. So we spent a lot of money and a lot of time making that happen. And Pablo, who does the music, his job is almost harder than mine, because he is actually working the music and the narration real time against me. So he has to remember where I am, what I'm doing, when to fade, when to play the next track. And so we actually are recording that. Every flight gets recorded, and we'll look at that. And so first, how did Michael fly? And then after that is, how did the choreography and the execution work?
Excellent.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, hey, thank you very much for
My
your time.
pleasure, yeah.
And if anybody out there has any questions for Michael or myself, please hit us up. Podcast at planetalkpodcast.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Plane Talk with Matt and Rob. And we'll see everybody when we're at home. All right, take care. Good night, Mike. Thanks.
Yeah, my pleasure.